Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah, it worked.
again.
Uh,
Good. Very much
I had
working.
earlier thought I was accepting it, and then I ended up calling you, so
Uh,
I wasn't doing something right.
yeah, I wasn't doing something right either. Dear. The camera is on either. Never mind. You see me?
I see your avatar, but not your
Darn
video.
it. So I'll try and turn it on. Just do that. There we go. Looking a bit sideways.
Yeah,
but
there we
never mind.
go.
Still here.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Turn the camera on. Turn helps.
Yeah. See if I can
Great.
get this.
How are you today? How's your
Oh, pretty
work?
good. Oh, what's up?
How was your work? You had to go to work yesterday.
Yeah, it worked out pretty good. I'm salaried, so I can pretty much go in any time, but there's some stuff I wanted to do. A lot of times during the week, there are projects I can't do, so I go in on the weekend to take care of them. So
Okay.
when I'm generally not interrupted, so I'm probably going to, after this podcast, I'll probably do that as well, just to catch up on a few things.
Projects.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, sometime we'll better talk about that.
Yeah.
Network engineering projects.
Yeah. I generally work with firewalls. I provision racks of firewalls and other things like that, and so I have a lot to do. Yeah.
Great. Good. So you had a good day. You had a reasonable day.
Yeah. It was pretty enjoyable, and today is, of course, Father's Day. It's been pretty decent here. Got a couple things from the kids, so it's worked out pretty good.
You got kids, lovely.
Yeah.
Excellent. I saw your video about Trump protests.
Oh, what?
I saw your video earlier in the week about the Trump protests.
Oh yeah, the Trump protests. Yeah, I went to a couple of those. Basically, I went during the afternoon. There was a Donald Trump basically came into town. He talked with the lawyer and did a big fundraiser. Yeah. He had to have $5,000 or more to get in, and so there was that going on downtown. So I left work and did the event, and I basically just filmed the protesters. What are they doing? What are they protesting? What are the signs? Stuff like that. And then I left, and then I went to the actual Donald Trump event later on in the evening in the Woodlands, and they were doing there were tens of thousands of people trying to get in, but there's only room for like under 3,000 people. So like tons of people outside, and there were protesters, one like in front of the building and then one across the way because there wasn't enough room in that section. So it was pretty cool. I got a chance to walk around. I walked the entire length of the line. It took me 20 plus minutes, and then came back around and got to see a lot of people gathering. It was pretty peaceful, on all ends. So it worked out pretty good.
Yeah. Good. Right. Well, ready to go with regressivism and stuff. I haven't done a lot of research this time. Just been conversations with people over the week. So I've got some stuff, but it depends what you want to talk about, really. Yeah,
it's sort of, this sort of just so the audience knows, like we're sort of planning on just essentially kind of talking about regressivism and progressivism and whatever that might mean based on like your experiences and my experiences, whatever that kind of thing. And then there was a shooting in Orlando, Florida, where 49 gay people were killed by an Islamist, an American citizen that was radicalized. And a lot of stuff has happened then as well. So I guess we'll sort of divide the podcast into those sort of things.
Sort of naturally and so forth. To be a bit careful about that Orlando stuff, because I don't want to start a lot of, don't want to get into it too fast because it's a bit raw still.
That's the thing. It's been kind of a shock for us as well, because we're not used to that sort of mass shootings going on here. We've seen a little bit of an uptick.
So it's which never happens. Never happens. A shot being fired is so rare. An MP shot is just don't think about it really.
So we've had to deal with that, and I haven't been able to keep up with it. Like I haven't been able to watch news 100% on the whole thing. I sort of over the time picked up some things from it, but it's been sort of a big deal here for us, like my perspective and how I've been looking at it, like with regard to the media. Like, so the media is sort of split two different ways. We have the way the left is handling it and the way the right is handling it. And it's so I've been watching a little bit of news in the evening, and a lot of the people on the left, they're sort of downplaying that it was terrorism, and they're just calling it mass shooting and a hate crime. And a lot of people on the right, they're basically saying, well, it is, you know, you want to refer to what it is, what's going on. But there's been a lot of information pouring about the nature of the person. You know, was he maybe a closeted gay, or was he, you know, how religiously motivated he was and stuff like that. So that's been sort of an issue over here we've been dealing with.
What is the right-wing media? I tried to keep ahead of what's going on in America by watching MSNBC, I think it's called.
Yeah, there are left-wing media. So if you,
those left-wing?
Yeah, they're technically our left-wing. They're very progressive friendly, you know, according to their own words. And then Fox News is our right-wing. They're more
Fox News. Oh gosh, right. So so what's in the middle?
Yeah. The middle, there's not too much of a middle. The closest to the middle that we've got is CNN, and they turned left a bit on this kind of thing here. The thing about CNN is they'll kind of go right wing to some extent to sort of recoup some of that audience, but as soon as there's like a news story that comes out and they need to switch to their particular narrative, they'll basically switch full stream and see if any conservatives hold on. So that's sort of.
So you feel a bit underserved by critical analysis of news?
Say that again.
Do you feel a bit underserved by critical, neutral analysis of news? Or is there a bias one way or the other?
Yeah, unfortunately, I would say so, because like what I'd like to see is just news reporting all the facts and not so much pontificating on it afterwards. The problem is to fill time and, you know, add time and all that kind of stuff. Essentially, what the news does in the different outlets is they basically formulate their opinion on what happened. They essentially talk about what isn't happening, and so the bulk of our media here in the States is left wing, and they're all like obviously left wing. I used to debate like against liberals, and they would basically say, "Oh, they're not left wing at all," but then you'd try to show them like left or right wing types of headlines. Why is one neutral or left wing, and why is one neutral or right wing? Where does a headline fit where it can be classified as neutral, just reporting the facts, or is it sensational?
You're conservative, and you want to be, to them you're left wingers.
Yeah.
It's neutral, but to you,
exactly. Yeah. So that's the dilemma is how do you relate that to them to where they understand it from your point of view, and what I've tried to explain it is there's essentially an absolute leftmost and rightmost, and somewhere you have to agree is the center. And if we can get people on both sides to figure out where that center is, then we can more accurately determine what is left wing and right wing. And so that's kind of.
I'll have a look around before we have another talk and see if I can find a centrist, what I think is an unbiased news source. I can find one in America.
As close as reasonably possible, and that's the challenge.
I'll take on that challenge, but there must be someone.
Yeah, there's got to be someone.
So you can't get any unbiased news. So what's regressive according to biased news?
Yeah. And so cutting to the regressive talk point. So how do we, and I'm just sort of throwing this up here in the air here. So how do we determine what's progressive and what's regressive? Because right now we have a lot of people that are self-identified liberals that are basically calling other left-wingers regressives. And a lot of those people that are the ones that are being called regressives, they consider themselves to be progressive. So that's been something that's fascinated me.
That's the only reference I've ever heard to regressive. Reactionary is the term we use, but regressive is, as far as I know, a neologism. It's only got this one specific use. Liberals are going backwards, or supposedly going backwards. Yeah.
And a lot of us on the right are used to the term reactionary used against us. Like we're reacting.
I use it.
Yeah. So, it's kind of the term loses some of its value unless you can show what the reaction is to, and is it a legitimate reaction or is it an overreaction? But on the left, I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's reaction is typically a reaction against some form of social reform. Yeah. Or change.
Or maybe progress per se. That's
progress.
Yeah.
So as a conservative, you should be reactionary.
Yeah, I guess so. So, the thing that's fascinated me is this whole regressive left, the phrasing, and progressives and liberalism and stuff like that. This has essentially been a conflict on the left. For me, the longest time growing up, like I'm in my 40s now, and I've been a conservative, like if I guess officially conservative for like 20 plus years. I voted Republican since 1990, but I had always considered the conflict to essentially be left versus right. And what we've seen in the last few years, you know, in the advent of Gamergate and other things, is essentially a left versus left, or maybe left versus further left, or left versus not quite as left.
I would say left versus fake left.
That may be the same too. So
that's the way a lot of regressives see it.
Yeah.
It's actually progress against reactionary and fake lefters. But of course they don't see it that way, which is are perfectly entitled to not do.
Yeah, a lot of
their term. So
yeah, for me, you know, I used to debate online, like on bulletin board services and stuff like that, from like mid 1990s to about the mid 2000s, and you know, it was mostly that left-right divide, and it was basically everyone on the left was essentially liberal, everyone on the right is essentially conservative, and it was sort of that paradigm. And then I basically in 2008 just started losing interest in politics because we had not very good politicians on the right and not very good politicians on the left. So the way I looked at it was there's not a legitimate left-wing champion and a legitimate right-wing champion. They can advocate either side effectively. They are both essentially destructive to their own causes, so they're not very good candidates. And so I just sort of lost interest in politics.
Do you put that down to the money in politics that you have, or
what?
Do you put that old? Was 2008 really for you about money in politics, or is that the cause of the fact that it's bad?
Not so much that. I looked at like Barack Obama, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton as essentially bad advocates for liberal ideals.
Okay.
And I looked on the right, like John McCain, as not a good advocate for conservative ideals. For basically,
what was wrong with John McCain? I'm sorry, I've always been someone I've rather admired, to be honest, until recently.
Yeah, well, he's often called a moderate or a centrist Republican, but he's very much a neoconservative, and I'm essentially what you might call a reformed neoconservative. Like, I was sort of buying into the idea of, you know, not just compassionate conservatism, because I always looked at conservatism as inherently compassionate, but after 9/11, and then, you know, we invaded Afghanistan, then we invaded Iraq, and then it was just this huge military buildup, and in compromise for all this extra money for the military and all these military actions, we would essentially let the left also do everything that they wanted, and ultimately what we ended up getting is just a huge,
a bigger state.
Yeah, a much bigger state,
which you hate.
Yeah, and you know, and for me, I look at why are people on the right they're supposed to be the pro-constitutionalist party, the pro-smaller government party, essentially agreeing to have as big a government as needed to do everything they wanted, and then we get, you know, 10 trillion, 12 trillion, 18 trillion dollar deficits, and sort of builds up. But for me, like in 2008, you know, things were going sour in Iraq, and essentially the neoconservatives were essentially taking over the Republican Party, and I don't want us to be a huge interventionist country that's causing wars or causing regime change all over the world. And on the other end, I don't want the government to essentially become a nanny state per se. And, you know, because when you give government all this power, the way I look at it, they tend to use that power against the people to keep them in line, to essentially control the people. Right. And unfortunately, that affects everyone, not just people on my side. It affects people on the left. And so, you know, that's sort of how I turn towards libertarianism, you know, down towards much less government, because I've always looked at government as conservatism, as small government, you know.
I understand.
You know, all that stuff. And the Republican Party ended up not being very much for small government.
So you didn't leave the Republican wing of the Republican Party. The Republican wing of the Republican Party left you. Yeah.
So they sort of left me behind. There's a line that Ronald Reagan said, is like, I felt the Democratic Party left me behind, and that's how he became a Republican. Well, I'm feeling like the Republican Party has been leaving me behind, because they're wanting a big government, you know, military state as well, and that's not good for anyone either, not just us, but others around the world, because typically that's what you use the military for other nations.
Those generals don't like going on exercises for too much, do they?
Yeah, no, they'd rather either do their old thing or whatever. So
yes, okay, right. So that's background to it.
so
So bringing that back to regressivism.
yeah. So yeah, what I look at is me. I'll just say my personal view of regressivism is when you're abandoning the individual, when you're essentially infringing on someone's individual rights to such an extent that they have no rights. You know, the whole point of the rule of law, the way I look at it is, the law means something if they're essentially few but legitimate laws that are there for a reason. But if everything you could possibly do is illegal, the law means nothing. If just walking down the street is somehow illegal or whatever, you know, relatively innocent activities are all illegal, then the law doesn't mean something. So it's not that the rule of law in and of itself doesn't mean anything, but when there's so many of them, that's.
Can you give me a specific regressive law?
A regressive law, let's see, would be like, hey, in order to protect the people, we need to take their guns away. Now that's an extreme example of one. You know, or in order to protect the people, we need to take their freedom of speech away, or we need to make sure that they can't say X, Y, and Z, even if it's not inciting a riot or calling to action someone doing something. If they say X, Y, and Z, they can't say it.
So to cut a long story short, political correctness embodied in law is your nightmare, which you call regressivism, which you think is what people on the left are pushing for.
Yeah. Political correctness, when it's not a legal matter, is more desirable. But even then, I personally am against political correctness as well, because you're essentially forcing people through peer pressure to say or not say things. You should we shall be able to say it organically on their own. Like, I'll just give you a bizarre example. Michael Jackson changed the meaning of the word bad. Yeah. It was good to be bad in the 80s, thanks to Michael Jackson. So, but that was an organic change. Yeah, people just, who's bad, I'm bad, or whatever. And it means something. So I don't care if language changes naturally. Like the term gay meant anything but homosexual up until a few decades ago. But it's organic. Yeah. So, so political correctness in that sense, in that very limited voluntary sense.
People structuring the language by getting behind the language with a bunch of board rubbers and should we have this word? Should we have smarty? No, we shan't have smarty. Should we have bull whipped? No, pussy whipped. No, we can't have pussy whipped. We can have a bull whipped. We can have horse whipped. We can have but we can't have pussy whipped. No. So but those kinds of exercises just do you nothing. Send you mad.
Yeah. Give me the choice to decide what is good and bad to say. Like, I don't deliberately go out of my way to insult people, but if I say something that accidentally insults someone, if I determine that, okay, that makes sense, you don't want to say that because you're going to guarantee hurting someone else's feelings, then let me on my own moderate my conversations, or let me conversely argue the point that no, actually, when I say this, it literally doesn't mean to offend you because of whatever reasons. Therefore, I should say it. But just keep in mind, when I'm saying it, there's no mean to offend.
So how do you feel about the current harassment laws, which say that you can't do? I think that the average in US states is that you can't do something which was, I think the term is annoy. I think ours is distress. Yours is annoy people. Because
I don't personally know anything about that, but I would say, just in terms of principle, I would be against harassment laws if it's just you're disagreeing with someone, or if you're countering the narrative, or even if you're just bugging someone per se. But if there is probably a threshold at which constantly getting onto someone will constitute harassment. It's just what is that, and that might have to be determined on a case-by-case basis, or there may be some general guidelines here. So I couldn't.
Well, as I understand it, it's in our country, and I'm pretty sure in yours, because it comes from the same root of law. It'll be the reasonable person test. Would a reasonable person feel they were being unreasonably annoyed, or would a reasonable person feel they were being menaced, or made to feel afraid, or intimidated, or insulted on the basis of their gender or their orientation or whatever? Do they feel as if they're being got at?
Yeah, I think if you get like a random assortment of people, put them in that situation and see if that offends them or goes beyond just that.
That'll be the laboratory test, but I think what they apply in court is just the judge saying, would a reasonable person think?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I'm fine with that. Like I'm still relatively pro free speech, so even you know, offensive stuff is okay. But I do think that ultimately people have to, on their own, sort of moderate their own behavior and try not to be an asshole, you know, to others. So generally,
which I think is easy when we're face to face. When online, which changes everything. Comments when it's to a person you don't know, or to a video screen which you can yell at like Sargon does. But you can't actually interact with the person. It changes everything, I think, because we're not programmed as over-evolved apes to be able to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would agree. So like I'd spent roughly a decade debating online, like tens of thousands of posts debating against a lot of others. A lot of these people became my friends online. A lot of them I would play video games with. But through that process, through that process, it was sort of learning experience, basically going through sort of a trial by fire. But it is very easy to say something and offend someone on the other end because they can't see your face, they can't judge your action or reaction, they can't tell sarcasm. Exactly. I remember I was posting some person and I thought I was putting a bunch of smileys in it, and then he replied to me basically being offended, and I told him, well, I put all those smileys in there for a reason. And he showed the post, was like, there's no smileys there. I was like, oh wow, I literally did. It's like you just type and you think you're doing stuff. So that was kind of embarrassing for me. So yeah, text is fairly neutral, but it's because you lack those visual cues or even audio cues. You can't tell.
So you can't empathize with the other person. So you can't tell what they're feeling. So what their intentions are. So you can send something completely inane, completely harmless. They'll take offense at it because you can't see how they're reacting to it as you say it.
Yeah, so I look at regressivism as essentially making the individual less important. You know, part of this is the whole collectivism versus individualism thing, but you don't necessarily have to be a collectivist to take away rights from an individual. Like Islam per se, in some of these Muslim countries, the laws that they use in Sharia law isn't explicitly collectivist in nature, but you may have like the Soviet Union where all the laws there are devised for the collective. So I'm not necessarily, like when I say I'm pro-individual, I'm not necessarily saying anti-collectivist, although I say I am anti-collectivist. But you can at least, but you can at least try to defend the individual. So that's a big aspect for me.
So I'll put something to you. The usual list of microaggressions which goes around. They say microaggressions. They shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. There's that sort of burst your bubbles that get you hot and happy about standing up for free speech, because that's as I see it, that's a voluntary code. That's an advisory guideline. That's not a law. That's not a. You thought badly if you didn't follow it, but if you do follow it, then you're just being polite. It's not a. You need to qualify for your exams or anything.
It depends on the context. Like here in some of the universities, apparently, you know, like demands are being placed by like some Black Lives Matter activists and others that are along that spectrum, although not explicitly linked with the group. They're essentially advocating for those lists to be put in college, and essentially, I don't want to say browbeating, but sort of like if someone does a list of these microaggressions, they could be reported to the school, potentially action could be put against them. That I would be against. But I mean, I understand why people would be you know, against all these little things, saying something a certain way, classifying it as a microaggression and being against that.
To be absolutely fair, I mean, you're going to call the leader of the gang Barack Obama. He actually came out strongly against that, didn't he?
He was like, hey,
you got to have a bit of a exchange.
And for me, that was unusual to see him to say that. Basically say, hey, don't be, I can't remember how he said it, but I did see the speech when it happened. He basically said, you know, don't be offended so easily, don't, you know, whatever.
So ready for people to disagree with you. And disagree with your stance on racism. They might use a racist word just to illustrate what their point of view.
And actually that's one of the values of freedom of speech, because if someone is literally being racist, calling people bad names because of the race, or discriminating against them, then you want to see that so you know to avoid those people. It's like, that guy, I'm gonna go that way, you know.
Say I disagree with you, or
or you're wrong,
rather than having it suppressed, I think is the usual way. It's stated. But of course, you know, it's very loaded. I mean, the language of history of the United States is complex, and racism is a big issue over there, the way it isn't over here.
Yeah. We have a different problem with, say, illegal aliens. Like illegal aliens is one of the microaggressive terms where you have to call them undocumented immigrants or something like that. So a lot of people on my side, we don't look at illegal aliens as being any sort of an insult. Aliens is the way we look at a fairly neutral term, and legal or illegal is a legal term, for lack of a better phrase or whatever. So we don't look at that, but there are people that they may actually be following that heading of being illegal aliens, or maybe they have relatives that are illegal aliens. They look at that as an insult, so they want to be known as something else. So that's the discussion.
Can you see the ambition from, I'll call my side of the argument, the liberal side? I'm not American liberal, but I think I understand what they're after. They're trying to create a more just and open society.
And I believe
there is that prejudice where people are more equal because they can be innately. So and liberate the individual.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think that's something we need to do, but let's leave this at the level of people. Let us organically and naturally evolve as a species, or whatever you want to call it. Let us do that. Don't let the government force that, because, we sort of had this discussion before, but a lot of the people look...
Can you just clarify, because I think we can wrap this up and move on a little bit. Is it the words that you matter there? Is it the words of litigation, or is it the power of government behind them?
Power of government. The issue is government is sort of an indirect actor that becomes the primary actor. Like if you and I have a disagreement, I'd rather you and I work on the disagreement than have the government necessarily get involved. Now, there could be like a civil lawsuit. Maybe you take something or I take something from each other, and therefore, the government has to get involved. But if it's just a disagreement, or like I say something and you say something different, we have like just a disagreement. I prefer the people essentially resolve those disagreements.
So there is something broken in American society. I'd rather the people individually and collectively in conversation sort it out without recourse to the government.
We're a highly litigious society, and I look at too many people, even individuals, suing each other over things that can't be worked out rationally.
Okay. I think I'm with you now.
Yeah.
On the same page. And you guys pursue each other for lawsuits all over the place. I hate to think what would happen if you litigated for words. You'd never stop talking either. So
yeah, pretty much. Well, you've heard the term ambulance chaser. That's essentially part of the whole thing.
But we don't have that.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
Oh, okay. Well, lucky you, I guess.
I don't know why. There must be some peculiarity of the law which discourages that. But we just don't have ambulance chasers. Probably possibly because of the National Health Service.
Oh, okay. It probably takes care of a lot of that.
That's just the point.
Yeah. I guess you might say government's already pre-involved, so calling on them to get involved after the fact when they're already there in the first place. So
Okay, so that's regressive for you. Is there anything which is limiting to freedom of speech in that way that would just cause berserkness and stupidity and
anything that affects anything, like, so we had sort of discussed this last week. I look at government as essentially it's there to protect our individual rights, not necessarily infringe on them. And a lot of people look at government as an extension of the will of the people, therefore they do whatever the will of people wants. But
put it this way, try to put it this way. What I think the left sees is that the rights aren't equal to start with, looking to government as a tool by which to fix the thing which is wrong. Inequities, absence of rights, the Black Lives Don't Matter, and the rest of these kinds of things. They're looking to government as a tool to get the power to do something. The power is a very slippery thing, so I completely agree. Let loose, you never know what it's going to do. So I can kind of understand what you're thinking there. Because like a sort of halfway sort of libertarian anarchist, socialist, government's not a big pal of mine. So, I can kind of get you on that.
I'm sort of in that libertarian capitalist sort of mindset, the free market and stuff like that. Like, I'm not completely against government, so I'm not in that anarchy space. I'm in the libertarian space. So I do believe government has a limited role, but the big fear that I have is that it's not just the left. The left in this country, at least, are known for infringing on rights, but the right also infringes on rights. So the left might infringe on free speech or might try to take guns away, when actually the left 30, 40 years ago was actually very much pro free speech. But the right, they'll try to infringe on privacy, and both will try to infringe on due process, or maybe have a way to sort of limit the ability to have a fair, public, and speedy trial. So both parties, the Republican and the Democrat Party on both sides in this country, are not doing a good job of protecting our individual rights. And that's been the conundrum a lot of us conservatives have had, and even a lot of liberals, the ones I used to debate against and debate with against others, they're having that problem as well. So
okay, so of course from the left, it's the corporations which we fear, their authority, which of course you don't appreciate or don't weight highly. We're again are looking to sort of wangle away around government, or use government somehow to play off against the corporations' power, intervene in our lives and fix the game. Which of course is a supposition we don't buy into.
Yeah, and you'll find sometimes liberals and conservatives will agree if they see the government has too much power and infringing on rights, or if they both see some corporations are going above and beyond and also hurting people deliberately. So there are some areas where conservatives and liberals can agree, but you are right. They tend to be big government versus big corporate, big business. That tends to be, the two sides.
So it's not, it's not as though you're stupendously in favor of big corporations, but you don't mind them. It's big government, because big government is even more something to be worried about.
Yeah, it would be foolish to say. Yeah, it'd be foolish to say only government does wrong, but not corporations or businesses or individuals, or vice versa. Only corporations or businesses or individuals do wrong and not government. Corruption, we're a flawed species like anything else. We're going to either make mistakes, or we're going to be selfish, or we're going to deliberately hurt others in order to benefit ourselves, as opposed to just ignoring someone else. We can actively hurt others. And so this can be something that can happen on the left and the right.
Okay, that's good. Very good. Very good. I should remind you that you just passed your half hour, so I need to remind you that you have this option to bail out at any time at this point. So
I'll probably leave in a minute. Let me see if
okay, let's see if we can wrap this up. I did look at Islam this week, because that's the other thing which usually people bring up. Yeah, they talk about regressivism, why we're in favour of this intolerant religion and so forth. So very briefly, I did find one. Did find one key thing, which is in Turkey, which was the Ottoman Empire in 1858, I think it was. They actually legalized homosexual activity.
Yeah, how things have changed.
So things have changed. So it's not basically Islam; it's some kind of local custom or cultural value, or in fact, once the Ottoman Empire disappeared in 1923, I think it was, after the First World War, a lot of French and British colonial law
divided up the land,
and incorporated in the nation's ordinances. So that's how so much of the Arab world and the Muslim world got to have its homosexual law. But so something that's to me that's results. That's a game set match to Islam, I think. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting how
of course it's horrible now, but.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting how those areas were more secular in the past and are now less secular. And that's been kind of a weird thing to see, that it's very oppressive, for lack of a better word. It's very, very dismal. A lot of people do not want to visit those areas of the world because of how it's turned out, how those nations have essentially regressed. So
I think if you put people under pressure, they will tend to turn to various kinds of extreme notions.
Yeah,
I think you've seen that probably in your life.
Yeah.
I know I have, but I think it's partially that psychology, and partially also just the dynamics of Saudi Arabia and what's going on with it and Islam, and the fact that it's trying to influence all the nations around it, as I say, because they're the ones with the oil money. That's how they're spending it. So they're trying to increase the influence of Wahhabism, as I see it. That's the way I read it. So so there's got all that, and plus America's slightly thumb-fingered approach to matters of Islam.
Yeah, our aggressive stance to the Middle East. Yeah.
So it's all a bit of a cauldron. I think that's probably more or less the explanation of why so many people turn to extreme interpretations of the Quran.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a factor there. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I will head on out.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting
Thanks
me
very
again.
much. That's been fascinating again.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't understand much what you stand for, but I'm hoping to understand you a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We're not always the easiest to understand over here in the States, and even us we have a hard time understanding everything ourselves about us, all the different factions within. So
I'm very sorry for Orlando, and I'm thinking about you guys over there and trying to keep the lid on things.
yeah.
So it's a difficult time for you. This election is a trying time.
Yeah, we'll work it out. One thing that's been good about America, at least internally, is ever since the Civil War, we've had a fairly good and heated way of essentially dealing with each other. A lot of argumentation and kvetching and complaining and whining and whinging and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, we haven't resorted to a lot of violence here against each other. So I predict we're going to be okay, but it's, all of our fingers and toes and arms and everything crossed. So we'll see how that goes.
So I've got my fingers over my ears and my hands over my eyes. Got my fingers crossed.
Exactly.
Okay, so see you around sometime.
All right. Later.
Bye.